How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Talk4 Podcast. So excited to have you here today and show you this fantastic episode. Just want to say quickly that episodes like this one and all the ones before and the ones in future are made possible by people who subscribe. Hopefully, just like you. I'm going to ask you today if you can leave a subscribe, leave a follow, leave a rating, leave a like or a comment, and just support the show in the little ways that you can, like that. It makes a huge difference on my end. And quickly, just want to plug as well. I've taken 30 of the best episodes of this podcast and turned them into a fantastic book that goes into 150 secrets to greatness. Each one of those 30 episodes gets crunched down into 5 of the best key takeaways from the whole talk and turns them into a fantastic book. Highly recommend you check it out. Please support the show by grabbing a copy, either a paperback or an ebook. And I can't wait to show you guys this one today. So guys, without further ado, let's get over to the episode. How's it going, guys? Welcome to episode 171 of Talk4, the quickfire podcast where we ask 4 great questions to unique and interesting people. Behind the mic today is your host, Louis Skupien. That's me. And wow, I honestly, words defy me. It is absolutely incredible to have this guest on today, Brigadier General Charles Duke, who's going to be answering some questions today for this episode, and also in the new studio as well, which is super exciting. But Charlie, let's dig into it. How are you doing today? Welcome to the show. Where are you calling in from?
Well, I'm doing well. We live in Greenville, South Carolina now. I grew up in South Carolina, not in Greenville, but our eldest son lives here, and we have a number of grandchildren here in Greenville. So we decided to move from Texas back to Greenville to be closer to family, and so we've been here about 3 years now, and really like it. A lot of friends, wonderful neighborhood, wonderful Anglican church that we attend, and so we've settled in.
That's
We miss
fantastic.
we miss Texas though.
I can
Yeah.
imagine. Texas is a great place. I would just like to say that, in terms of people listening in as well, we'll dig into the whole podcast in a minute, but when I first started this episode, on my list of the kinds of people I wanted to have on the show, or that sort of wish list or dream list I had, one of the very top ones was an astronaut. Now, I didn't care who it was just any astronaut, because I thought that that was the coolest possible job in the world and would be the most incredible, inspiring conversation as well. And I did achieve that goal, but I just never would have ever believed we could have got to this stage here. I mean, having you on the show today, it's a true honor. And before we get into this, I just want to say a huge thank you for not only your service, but also for taking the time to spend a little bit of time with me today and this audience. So thank you, Charlie.
Delighted to be with you, Louis.
It's going to be such a great episode. So let me introduce you then. I'm going to get you to kind of do the same in a minute too. So here's the paragraph I've got really on you then. So Brigadier General Charles Duke, one of only 4 surviving moonwalkers. As the lunar module pilots on Apollo 16 in 1972, Charlie became the 10th person and the youngest at the time to walk on the moon. A distinguished Air Force test pilot and graduate of the Aerospace Research Pilot School under Chuck Yeager. Charlie also served as CAPCOM for Apollo 11, guiding Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin during that historic landing. Beyond spaceflight, he's had a remarkable career in aviation, business, and public service, and continues to inspire through his stories of exploration, leadership, and courage. Charlie, did I miss anything there, or is that all sounding about accurate?
That's pretty accurate. My wife and I also have a Christian ministry that we involved in, and we travel around the world to share our faith and the goodness of God.
Fantastic. So if I hand that sort of introduction over to you, really, in a minute, or kind of like a little snapshot, really, how would you describe yourself? I mean, everything about your career is kind of it must be hard to find a way to humble brag, but I mean, everything you've done is just incredible. So, if you had to describe yourself over a little bit of a snapshot, how would you describe yourself?
Well, it developed as an adventurer, but when I grew up, I wasn't that way. I was just average guy growing up in a small town with a twin brother in Lancaster, South Carolina. I did have ambition, wanted to go to, my dad was in the Navy during World War II. And so I decided I wanted to follow his career. So I went to the Naval Academy Fell in love with airplanes when I was at the Naval Academy, and I had a choice back then. You could go into the Air Force from the Naval Academy, uh, and so it was Naval Academy, Naval Aviation or Air Force. And I unfortunately didn't qualify for naval aviation. I had an astigmatism in my right eye, and they said, you don't qualify for naval aviation, but the Air Force will take you. So I went into the Air Force, and it was a great opportunity for me. I started in flight school in the summer of 1957, was in flight school in South Georgia when Sputnik went up in October of that year. Finished my training a couple of years in Texas and then back in Georgia, and was assigned to Ramstein Air Base in Germany for my first assignment as a fighter interceptor pilot. And I was there for 3 years and flew F-86 and then F-102s. And we sat alert and were 5 minutes so we were ready to go if the radar noticed something coming across the Czech border or the East German border, and or some unknown. Anyway, we scrambled a lot, and it was an exciting job. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Germany and traveling around, seeing the country, and uh, there were 4 or 5 of us bachelors in our squadron, so we had a great time weekends partying and dating various girls around. And anyway, we ended up applied for graduate school and was sent to MIT and started in '62 there for a 2-year master's program. That first summer, I met a gal named Dottie Claiborne, and after an hour talking to her, I left for my hometown, and this was in late August, and to see it was between summer school and first semester. And I told my mom I'd met the girl I was going to marry. So after an hour talking to this beautiful young lady, and anyway, we started courting, and the next year we got married in June of '63. So be 62 years last June for us. We're still at it, and we've got a wonderful relationship. And so anyway, I was got back and finished my degree at MIT, and I was working on the Apollo guidance and navigation system, which MIT had the contract to build. And I met some astronauts, and they were really excited about their job. And I asked them, how did I get that job? And they said, well, get your degree and go to test pilot school, and you might have a chance. So I followed their advice, and '66 it was, no, '64 I graduated from MIT, went to Edwards, where I was enrolled in test pilot school for a year. Graduated in the summer of '65, and that September '65, NASA had another call for astronauts. So I applied and was selected in the next year, April '66. I was selected one of 19 guys that were selected for the 5th group of astronauts, and we were picked for the Apollo program, actually. And so we moved to Texas, and with a little boy named Charles, and our second son was born a year later. And so I was in the Apollo for 6 years, and then 4 more years in the space shuttle, and then I retired as an astronaut. Worked on a number of Apollo flights. I was CAPCOM on Apollo 11. CAPCOM on Apollo, no, 10 was the first, Apollo 10. Then I was, Neil Armstrong asked me to be CAPCOM for their landing on Apollo 11. Then I was backup crew for Apollo 13. We flew on 16, and then John Young and I ended up backup on Apollo 17.
That's a hell of a journey. My
Well,
goodness
on
me.
Apollo, yeah, on Apollo, I was involved in more Apollo flights than any other astronaut. Five of them I was involved with, and that was very, very unusual. But it was just the way my career went, and I was very thankful. Worked with a tremendous group of astronauts in those days, and I I got so many favorites, I can't list them all, but we were all really, really good friends. And so it was, uh, tough to lose the Apollo 1 crew and the fire in 1967, right after I got there. And so it set us back. We had, from, I think, early 66 until uh, a year later, we had 8 people killed in the astronaut office, and 4 in airplane accidents, 1 in an automobile accident, and 3 in the fire at Kennedy. So it was a very stressful time in the astronaut office at that point. Apollo was getting going, and so it set it with the fire in the Apollo 1. It set us back 2 years in our planning while we redesigned and that we'll call it the redesign of the Apollo spacecraft, and also well, that gave us a lot of safety, and it took them 2 years to get all that done. So we were 2 years behind schedule, but we still made it. 8 months before, no, 6 months before Kennedy's time ran out. No, that's not right. 8 months, I guess it was. Anyway, we landed on the moon on Apollo 11, and I was involved with that. So it was a big, exciting moment.
Oh, no doubt about that. I mean, what an incredible, incredible career, and the way that all went is just stunning, to be honest. I'd like to draw it all back though to the very, very origins of this, and there was something that when I was reading up on you, kind of related to a little bit, I'd say. So both of us got hooked in aviation through model aircraft as kids, from what I've read. And I would love it if you could just take us back to your early days in Lancaster and just kind of tell me a little bit about how building and flying models kind of shaped your curiosity, discipline, and ultimately sort of paved the way towards the Air Force and NASA. Like, was there a specific moment where you realized, hey, I really want to fly jets, or maybe one day, reach for the stars?
Well, after World War II, we settled in South Carolina. During World War II, I did do model airplanes, and we were pretended to be fighter pilots, and we sailed them off my grandmother's top floor of her 2-story house, and sometimes we set them on fire and threw them off, and these little wooden models, paper mache, not paper mache, but balsa wood models. And so that was an interest in flying, and of course, all of the going on in World War II, as a little boy, with all the aviation and the fights we saw, and with Germany, and dogfighting, and also defending, and so that got me thinking about aviation. But really, my thought was, my dad had been in the Navy. He had not been a flyer, but the Navy treated him good. So I said to my dad, I said, I'd like to go to the Naval Academy, with the thought of being in the Navy, and no thought of aviation. But I did have a little dream about this was the beginning of the jet age. This is like 1947, 48 time frame. And you could over South Carolina, when it was a pretty day, you could see we had several Air Force bases nearby, and you could see the contrails go over. And wow, that one of those airplanes are barely up there, really up there. You can't even see them hardly, and they make this long contrail, and that would be great to make a contrail. So that sort of was the motivation behind. And since Daddy had gone to the Naval Academy, I mean, was in the Navy, I decided I'd go to the Naval Academy. there wasn't an Air Force Academy then. And so I went to the Naval Academy, and like I said, I fell in love with airplanes. And you could go into, back then, there was no, as I said, no Air Force Academy. And so 25% of the class could volunteer for the Air Force. And since I qualified for Air Force flight training, I decided to volunteer for the Air Force. And so that's put me in the Air Force from the Navy. And so when I graduated in 57, I went to Air Force Flight School, and that started my aviation career at Moultrie, Georgia, at Spence Air Base. And I loved it. I fell in love with flying right away and said, boy, this is for me. I made the right choice.
Totally imagine. I mean, the hooks it gets in you after those first experiences and feeling that speed and that power and just that rush. I mean, it is something truly, truly special. So if we talk a little bit about that, I mean, for me, I'm 23 and, I grew up around, models of the F-16 and, the Blue Angels and, things like this. But, looking back at kind of like what I consider to be like historic planes and stuff like the F-104, my God, I mean, what a legend. It's just like a piece of just incredible history. And
Yeah.
you got to fly it, things like that. So, I mean, you trained under legends like Chuck Yeager and flew in jets such as the F-86, the F-104, the T-33 before joining NASA. So big names there. I would love to know not only about what those experiences were like individually, but also just about some of the lessons you learned going into that too then. So high speed, high risk experiences. Obviously, a lot of that would have paved the way for, the I guess the skill set you would have needed to become an astronaut and go on to do what
Yeah.
you went on to do. So can you talk a little bit about that and maybe some of those lessons you learned at Edwards and within the jets and the school there?
I was selected when I graduated. Well, before I graduated, I applied for test pilot school. Was accepted. I had the minimum flight experience time, but they accepted me. And so I went to Edwards, and Chuck Yeager was the boss. He was the commandant. He briefed us, and you got this hard job. It's a real stressful job. You got a lot over the next year to learn, and flying and academics and all that stuff. Well, I was prepared for the academic side of it, and I had enough experience in flight time, of course, to get into Edwards. And I found the test pilot school was very challenging, but also exciting and fun. I enjoyed that year. We did first we did 6 months of what we called learning to really be a test pilot. A test pilot is not scarf out the window and loops and zoom. It's very precise flying. You have to get a data point at 20,000 feet plus or minus 10 feet at 200 knots plus or minus 2 knots and stable the airplane and then record all of the data of what the airplane's doing. And so it a test pilot thing was not scarf out the window, and the cockpit and just zooming around. We did had Once we got into the final stages, we flew F-104 a lot, and it was used of what we called zoom maneuvers. They were experimenting with a X-15 rocket plane, and Yeager had flown the X-1 rocket, and so we didn't have any rocket planes, but we had an X-104 that we would drop, just have the internal fuel, and we put on a partial pressure suit, and we'd fly out to 35,000 feet, turn around and accelerate to Mach 2, and as fast as it would go. And then the profile was to pull the nose up to 45 degrees and just let it go. And you'd hold the attitude of 45 degrees nose up until you ran out of gas at about 100,000 feet and ran out of energy about 100,000 feet. And you just roll over and come back down. And that you had to shut the engine down, so you were what's called dead stick, and you were opposite the Edwards uh, Air Force Base lake bed, which had a 17-mile long runway on it. Now, it was dirt, I mean sand, but it was packed. And if you didn't get a restart, you landed on the lake bed. But anyway, those were really exciting missions. And it was very precise control, as you had to keep the nose pointed straight ahead as you went over the top and came back down. Uh, and so that was the exciting rides in the 104. And we did a number of those. Uh, and so I learned a lot about handling qualities of airplanes and how precise you have to be in critical phases of flight like that. And that you applied a lot of that to the flying the lunar module. It was rocket engines and controlling it, but you had to be very precise when you came down to land on the lunar surface. And the thing could turn over. You could break a leg off the lunar module if you landed wrong. So there were a lot of training things that we learned at Edwards that we applied then to training and flying the lunar module.
Absolutely. So then somewhere along the line there, astronaut, NASA, selection process, how did you find out? When did it kind of come onto the cards for you, I guess? Just the whole story there, really, of getting into NASA. And then we're going to dig into, obviously, the big story. And I'm excited for that. I really want you to recount the whole story of it, because there's one thing hearing the story, and then it's another thing hearing the story. So talk to us about the origins there. NASA, astronaut, how did it begin?
Okay. Yeah. Well, graduated from test pilot school in June of 65. And in September, I saw an article in the paper that NASA's selecting the 5th group of astronauts. And it listed the criteria. And I said, well, that's me. And so I went to Yeager. I said, I'd like to apply for the NASA astronaut program. He said, well, here, I'll find out what you got to do. So we filled out an application. They sent it to Air Force. Air Force sent it to NASA. And that process started in September of 65. And in 66, I got a call. April of 66, I got a call from Deke Slayton, who was head of the original astronauts and was one of the head of the selection committee. He said, hey, Charlie, we picked you and we want you to come report by the 1st of May. Well, hallelujah, that was so exciting to get that news. So we packed up and we had a couple months to get ready and close up things at Edwards. And I had a great job at Edwards, but I was going to have a better job as an astronaut. So we said goodbye to all of our friends and we started out to Edwards and from Edwards to Houston. We had a little boy at the time. Charles was about a year old, I guess, and so that started my career in May of 66 at NASA. And fortunately, I got involved in mostly my first year or so was learning NASA. If you're going to go to the moon, you got to know what kind of rocks to pick up. So we started doing a lot of geology training, which was a lot of fun because you'd get out in the field, you'd leave your office and go camp out and somewhere in Arizona or wherever they decide you wanted to study rocks. And so that was a good thing. And then I guess at NASA, I started in on the lunar module too. And I don't remember how. There were 3 crews. Let me just say there were 3 crews back in Apollo. We had a prime crew that was going to fly. We had a backup crew, and then we had a support crew. And the support crew were the gophers. They go do this, go do that, take care of this, take care of that, while they trained. And so I was a support crew I got selected for a support crew on Apollo 10. And it turned out it was the first time we took the lunar module to the moon on Apollo 10. This lunar module was not capable of landing, but it was capable of doing all the other maneuvers. And so we practiced. We started down in a simulated landing and aborted and came back. Well, that went really well. And they had asked me, since I would follow the development of the lunar module, Tom Stafford asked me to be CAPCOM in mission control for that mission and for the landing part simulation. And so that went really well. And so Neil Armstrong was the commander of the next flight, which was really going to try to land. And he said, Charlie, why don't you do the same thing for us? You got all that experience. I said, well, it'd be a great honor to do that, Neil. And so I was put on that crew at mission control. And our Gene Krantz was the flight director, and I was CAPCOM, and then we had a whole room full of controllers. And so we practiced for 2 months. It was all we had from the time of 10 to 12, 11 was a 2 month time frame. And so we were ready to go. And so we started the descent, and everything was good until we started the descent. Then we lost communications, and the computer started overloading, and we were having all these major problems. And and I said, and I was worried, and I said, oh no, I don't think hopefully we can overcome all these. Anyway, things we knew what was wrong, and so they were able to overcome all of that stuff. And then we had targeted them. Finally, we had targeted them into the wrong place, and so when Neil pitched over, he couldn't land. It was too rough, and so he had to fly horizontally at about 500 feet above the ground to a place where he could land. Well, that used up all the reserve fuels, and so now we're minimum fuel. And the final call was from Mission Control. The final two calls was Eagle 60 seconds. It meant he had 60 seconds to land. And then I called Eagle 30 seconds, and they weren't on the ground, but they were close. About 14 seconds later, according to my watch, I heard Buzz Aldrin say, "Contact, engine stop." And it was a great sigh of relief. They were on the ground and successfully. And what an accomplishment. And so as a result of that experience, I was put on backup crew for Apollo, support crew first for that was Apollo 11 and 10, and then backup crew on Apollo 13, flew on 16, and backup crew for 17. So 5 missions I worked on as a crewman, and was very, very fortunate to have flown and experienced all of that camaraderie and friendship with various astronauts back in the Apollo days.
Absolutely. From every angle of it, you got to experience all of it. It's really, really incredible. But the one that you were missing there was obviously Apollo 16. So now I really value people telling great stories in the show. And one of the points I try and make is I try not to interrupt people when they talk as well. So you know what? I would just love to hear the full story, just everything that you remember, how it felt, just every detail that you can give us. So if we go selection, training, launch, journey to the lunar orbit, descent, EVA operations, collecting samples, the lunar rover, returning to Earth. Naturally, that's a lot to get through. So, you condense as much as you want, but I mean, I just have to hear the story from you, the man himself, please grace us with the full story if you can, with the time that we have.
Well, sure, I'll try to get it in about maybe 5 or 10 minutes. But anyway, after a backup, John Young and I were selected for prime crew for Apollo 16. And we were delayed a couple of years because they had a problem with Apollo 13, of course, and that delayed our launch for a couple of years. And anyway, we trained for a place landing called the Descartes Highlands. We were the only mission to go to the mountains of the moon, and it was in the south quadrant and a little east of the center of the moon. And if you look at the elevation from our landing site to where Neil Armstrong landed, we were 8,000 feet above that point. So the rocks were is totally different terrain. Rocks were different, non-volcanic. John and I had trained. We ended up with the Apollo 13 delay. We ended up training 2 years for that mission, and we probably in the simulator we probably crashed on the moon 500 times, but we landed 2,000 times, so we knew how to do it. And so our land at first we were on the launch pad, and we had been delayed for a month due to an unrelated problem to our space. Well, it was in our spacecraft, but anyway, they delayed our launch for a month, and so we finally lifted off in April. And I was in the Saturn V. I was on the right side as you look in the hatch, and the windows are covered over at that point, and so you can't see outside. And so you're listening to the countdown, and everybody is thinking, keep counting, keep counting. I don't want an abort. Keep counting. Because on abort, you only had 4 hours to get off. And in that if you didn't get off in that 4 hours, you had to wait another month for the moon to come back around and to get into the right position. So we'll keep counting. And so right on the schedule, they hit engines ignition, and the thing started to shake. And the Saturn V was big shaky to me. And you're up on the top of this 360-foot long vehicle, and the rocket engines, the 5 big engines are moving at the bottom, and that vibration runs up the spacecraft till it hits the spacecraft, and it was a big vibration from side to side. And I didn't remember anybody telling me it was supposed to shake. So I got a little nervous, and my heartbeat later on, I found out it was 140. It lifted off. John Young, who'd flown before, his was 70. So he was real calm. And the first stage was real shaky, but then after that, it was very smooth in the orbit. And we proceeded on schedule and arrived at the moon on schedule. Everything was going well until an hour before we were to land, and we were on the backside of the moon and flying formation sort of, and Mattingly had to change his orbit so that we'd be in the right position if we had to abort our landing. And so the next time around, we were going to land. So we were an hour before. Well, he checks out his spacecraft, and he says, there's something wrong here with this main engine. Well, that's a no-go. John says, don't burn. So when he said that, we weren't going to land on the next rev. So that was really a disappointment. 8 miles above the landing point, and you can look down and see it, and they're about to tell you to come home because we got this problem. So anyway, mission control said, stand by, look at it. And we orbited 2 times. And finally, after the second orbit, they said, well, we can't fix it, but we know what's wrong, and we're going to give you a go for landing. and so the next time around, manually burn on the backside, and then you are landing on the next rev. And what a relief! And so that was the last revolution that we could land and still get back to our landing site. Uh, the moon was slowly rotating out from under our orbit, and so we had to track back to the right to get back to our landing site. And this was the last opportunity. So we did get to land, and and from then on, everything went really, really well. We spent 3 days on the moon. We deployed the rover. We drove the rover, I don't know, 20 miles maybe total distance, and collected several hundred pounds of moon rocks. The rover really, the last 3 missions with the rover really revolutionized lunar exploration. Prior to the rover, you had to walk, and now the rover you could ride. And we went about 4 or 5 miles away, climbed a mountain called Stone Mountain on the south side, and it was very exciting. 3 day stay on the moon. Everything went really well, and we didn't have any setbacks, if you will, or troubles. We fell down a lot. It was hard to keep your balance walking around up there. And the only time I had a real moment of fear was at the end. John and I were going to do the Moon Olympics, and we were going to do the high jump. And
heard about this.
yeah, so I started to bounce. Down here with all of my stuff on, I weighed 363 pounds. Up on the moon, 60 pounds. And so you had a real springy attitude. Well, the backpack unfortunately weighed as much as I did. So when I jumped, I straightened up. Center of gravity went backwards, and over I went backwards. And that was the only time in a flight where it was scared. I was scared because if the backpack breaks, I'm dead. So I had this thought, do something, and I rolled right. So I rolled right and broke my fall on my right side, bounced onto my back, and I'm on my back. My heart's pounding. Well, I'm still alive anyway, and the suit pressure was good. And uh, John didn't like it. He came running over and said, "That wasn't very smart, Charlie," and fussing at me. So he helped me up, and I checked out everything, and I was okay. Mission Control didn't like the Moon Olympics, so that was the last event we had. I set the moon high jump record, but we didn't get to do. Anyway, things went well, and one of the sweetest things I think I got to do was to leave a picture of my family up on the moon. It was a little snapshot, and I took a picture of the picture, and so my family's picture was up on the moon, and you could tell it was a family picture for a while, but the temperature on the moon was about 140 degrees at that point, I think. So a little snapshot didn't last very long at 140 degrees on a hot surface. Wow. But anyway, it lasted long enough to get a picture. And our 3 days on the moon was highly successful. And so we learned a lot about the mountains of the moon. The rocks were different, so the geologists were so excited, and it was a good selection for landing spot for us. One more flight. We were the fifth landing. There was one more flight after that, Apollo 17, and Apollo was over. Apollo was so successful they canceled the last 3 missions. Which was a disappointment, of course, to the astronaut office because the crews were already selected. But NASA said, no, we're wasting our money to the moon. Well, they didn't really use it that way, but that's really, we wanted to start using money for a shuttle because we about exhausted everything we needed to do up on the moon at that point. So we went in a space shuttle. I started working on space operations, space shuttle and stuff, and then in '76 it was, I guess, I decided to leave NASA. Working on the shuttle wasn't excitement, and I wanted to get out and just change a career, really. So resigned from NASA and left the Air Force active duty, went in the reserves, and went and became a businessman in San Antonio, Texas. Successful, and but then after a couple of years, what was really attracting me was my Air Force reserve career. I was working at recruiting service. So I sold my business and started focusing on my Air Force reserve career, and helped recruit a lot of people during the 1980s into the Air Force. And that allowed me to travel a lot, meet a lot of people, and that's where I got promoted to general. And then I retired from the Air Force in '86, and yeah, '86. And uh, my wife and I had become believers, and so we started a Christian ministry, and we did. And we're still involved in Christian activities all over the world. People invite us to come, and so it's been a, a, a a very busy schedule ever since. We're still involved. I'm involved in various business activities. I don't run anything, but I get involved in some businesses. But Christian ministry is very active, and then we involved in a church and involved in various activities around Greenville, South Carolina, where we're involved in some stuff. And so we're enjoying grandkids and great grandkids, and I'm still healthy. So as long as I keep my health and and blessed, we'll continue to do the same things we've been doing. So because we like it, and it's exciting and rewarding.
Oh, it's incredible. So it's such a full life, and you've done so much. But I mean, you just seem to have accomplished everything. It's really inspiring to see that. I got to ask, when I look at the moon nowadays on a full moon night, and I go and have a look and stare at it for a while and contemplate, I just get, I don't know, it's something very inspiring about it. And I often, on the run up to this podcast, obviously thought of you as well. I'd love to know from your perspective nowadays, if you see a full moon and a bright night sky, what kind of a feeling does that give you? Is it like kind of a home away from home feeling, or just sort of a bit of pride, or I don't know? Just tell me a bit about that.
Well, I wouldn't call it. It's not home away from home, but it's a feeling of appreciation for the opportunity that I had to be able to be one of the 12 men that stepped onto the moon. It was a great honor. I still can't believe that I got selected to do that, and so. I want to be a representative of our country, the astronaut office, and bring honor to what was accomplished. More and more people are believing that we really did go to the moon, and I still have debates with some people. Wow, you really didn't go to the moon, and I have irrefutable proof that you didn't go to the moon. Well, they don't have irrefutable proof, and I tell them, if we faked it, why did we fake it 6 times? We made it. We landed on the moon 6 times. The evidence is overwhelming. So I still get some people that when I lecture, prove that you went to the moon. I don't believe it, and so they don't have a good reason. They just don't believe it. But you look at the evidence now that we landed, and a surveyor, which is a satellite orbiting the moon, mapping the moon, have taken pictures of every Apollo landing site. And on Apollo 16, you can see our descent stage, you can see the car we left, you can see the tracks we made, and you can see our experiments package that we left. You can't fake that. It's there and in the photographs. And every Apollo landing site has that same evidence. So it's overwhelmingly a fact that Apollo was real. and 12 of us got to the great thrill and the honor of being a man who walked on the moon.
Do you find that the naysayers, in a sense, kind of sour the feeling of accomplishment in a way, or is it completely the opposite? I guess it's kind of a compliment in a way. If so many people are trying so hard to find a reason why they could find a way to say it was impossible or it never happened, it kind of says something about how special and incredible and almost hard to believe that
Yeah,
was, right?
yeah, right. That's the problem. They don't have any evidence that we didn't believe it. We didn't do it. The evidence is overwhelming that we really did it. And I don't understand why people have this we that we faked the moon landings. It was no reason to fake the moon landings. We were in a race with the Russians, and we were racing to get to the moon. And the Russians knew we were headed to the moon on Apollo 11, and they never questioned it. They never said it was fake. They knew they were getting beat and beat bad in the moon race, space race back in those days. And so the world accepted it back in those days, and we brought back moon rock. There's 600 pounds of moon rock that we brought back. They're totally unique. And there was no way to collect that unless you go up there and pick them up yourself. And so the moon rock, there's so much evidence that every Apollo landing was real. And it's just some people just don't think that we did it. So I don't know why.
Well, that's on them, sir. I'd love to ask though, what does it actually feel like on the moon? I mean, you told us all about the mission, but I mean, just in your head,
Well,
what did that all
yeah.
feel like?
Well, it was exciting, wonder, awe. But I felt right at home. We recognized our landing site, the major features that we could see that we had studied. The only uh, new experience, I guess, was when we got there was the photographs that we had studied were taken by Stu Russo on Apollo 14, and they had resolution of 40 feet. So craters smaller than 40 feet you couldn't see in these pictures we studied. So when we got there, there were a lot of craters and a lot of objects less than 40 feet that were visible. And so it was, wow, look at all those craters as we came down to land. But when we landed, we felt right at home. There was Stone Mountain to the left and Smoky Mountains to the right. And you could see out in front of us the open terrain that we'd studied. And then to the right, there was a North Ray crater that we saw when we came down. So when we landed, I felt right at home. Oh yeah, there's what's his name over there, and there's what's his name out there, and so we got in the rover and we had our trajectories planned, and we struck out, and we knew exactly where to go, and we found every objective. So it felt being at home. But I'm in a spacesuit; you can't pinch yourself, so you sort of blink your eyes. I'm really on the moon, and that wonder and awe never left me after even after 3 days there. It was a total new experience and a wonder and a place that we'd studied so hard. Now we were getting to explore it for real, and everything worked so well. The car, John's navigation, my navigation, and John's driving, and so we had a great team, and we had fun doing it. And while we were enjoying ourselves and the wonder and awe of it, we were also doing our job of collecting the right kind of rocks and et cetera.
Job well done, that's for sure.
Yeah.
When you look at pictures of the moon, I've got a picture of you right here on the moon, and I look at that and I think about the terrain there, and I just think it looks in a way, I don't know. I mean, hard to imagine, but it looks grey, barren, desolate, devoid of life, almost kind of a bit dead. Does it feel like that on the moon, like it's barren and you're not meant to be there? Or does it kind of feel like there is actually life and purpose and stuff there and a future there
No,
potentially?
well, it is lifeless, and the pictures for some reason it looks grayer than it really is. I found it uh, more on the white side than the gray side. Uh, but when you walked on it, the brightness of the moon's surface, it flipped over the rock, and underneath is the rock, the soil's not exposed to radiation, so it's darker. And so most around the car where we drove and where we operated around the lunar module, it turned the surface turned dark gray. But it was mostly I describe it as mostly white as we were on the surface, and it's very, very fine. And as you step on it, you never sink in more than just a couple of inches. But when you shovel, you can shovel down as far as you can go, and it's still unconsolidated. But when you look at it, and you wonder, why don't you sink in? Well, the surface is actually pulverized rock. And if you look at it on a microscope, it's very angular. And so all of those angular rocks lock together. So when you step on them and you put pressure on them, and that's why you never sink in more than a couple of inches. But I cored with a 10-foot drill down 10 feet, and we extracted it. And when we brought it back, it was still unconsolidated 10 feet down. And the rocks are really there because I think of all the meteorite explosions and hits there and have caused and pulverized the rock, and all that rains back down onto the surface. And now what you're walking on is this stuff that's been pulverized by meteorite impacts and all. And so, as I said, it was we had no trouble. We felt right at home. We had no trouble navigating. The shadows were always west, so we used the shadow as the direction west for our compass, and so we could navigate to the top of the mountains, 2 miles to the west and 4 miles to the north, and so and everywhere we went, we recognized it because we'd studied the overall maps of the area for 2 years. So we had it basically memorized. And so that's why I think you felt so much at home. The Apollo astronauts did, because of the familiarity we had of the sites through study and observation from the photographs that were taken.
Right. So basically, the moon has been taking one for the team for us for a very long time, then, is what I'm taking from that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're about to go back. Artemis, I'm not working on Artemis, but I met the crew, Artemis 2, and talked about their profile. They're not, they're going to land, not, I don't think Artemis 2 is landing, but the next flight will land similar to what we did in equatorial orbit. But the Artemis 2 are going to be 6,000 miles beyond the moon, and they're going to be able to look back and see the whole backside of the moon, which we could only see from 170 miles above. And so we had a very limited view, but they're going to see the whole backside. I don't know what the sunlight situation is going to be, but they're going to then look beyond the moon and see the Earth out there. So yeah. Those guys and gals going to be a very spectacular mission. So I'm excited about their possibilities and opportunities next year in the spring sometime.
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting for those pilots. And talking about Earth, then, there's something I've realized sometimes in photography. I love to whip the camera out when you see something incredible, like a fantastic sunset or anything of that nature. But I've recognized sometimes that what we see with our own eyes you just can't quite capture what you can see in the camera, basically. And just what you can see with your human eyes is just so much more vivid sometimes than what you can just try and replicate. And, just during that mission, whether it was Earth or the moon or the stars or whatever, what was one of the most standout sights or moments where it just absolutely took your breath away, or a couple of them, or was there like an absolute highlight moment there?
Well, I think the one of the highlight moments was getting into lunar orbit. We entered into orbit on the backside, and it was dark back there when we went into orbit. And then we came into sunlight, uh, and uh, and the backside was really, really rough. So we came around to the front side and we said Earthrise for the same at the first time, and that was really spectacular to see the Earth come up from behind, from beyond the moon. And we were all glued to the window and the cameras going and taking in that sight of there was Earth. I call it that jewel of Earth just suspended up in the blackness of space. And
Wow.
in the when I became a script believer, I started reading this Bible, and what I saw is described. The Bible says, when God made the earth, He suspended it upon nothing, and that's exactly what it looks like, hung up there in the blackness of space. And another scripture says, God uh, sits enthroned above the circle of the earth. And I didn't see God enthroned, but I saw that circle of the earth out there, 250,000 miles away or thereabouts. So it's just, I think that view of seeing the moon and the earth hung up in the blackness of the sky was probably one of the top experiences of my life that I'll never forget. And then the next one would have to be the first steps onto the moon. I'm on the moon. When you're 6 hours late landing and then 7 hours late getting out, you're really excited about stepping onto the moon. And here I am, John. Let's go to work.
Wow. So, I mean, I could talk to you about this for absolute hours, but I know we're hitting the back end of your time available here today. So I'd like to round off with one really important question that I'd like to get in here before we go into the outro for this podcast then. So, I mean, hearing what you've done, everything you've learned, it's absolutely phenomenal what you've done with your life. I think it's truly inspiring. And, for me, as well as all the youngsters who are potentially listening in now as well, you've flown thousands of hours, you've walked on the moon. I mean, what are the biggest key takeaways and lessons you can give to a youngster nowadays? Like for me, I mean, I can probably talk about this right now because it's coming up, and this will probably go out after it's happened. But I'm flying an F-16 at Edwards soon, going up to 50,000 feet and seeing hopefully the curvature of the Earth. And just in terms of your experience, how do you process things like that? And in terms of dreaming big, doing incredible things like you've done, or what I'm hoping to try and do at Edwards, just for the youngsters, just getting the most out of life, squeezing it and getting everything you possibly can and shooting for the stars. What are your biggest lessons there? What should people be aspiring to be and do?
Well, I think that we're each given desires. And what I tell the young people is keep your antennas up. And by that, I mean be sensitive to the thoughts you have and the directions your life seems to be going. And first off, take good care of yourself physically, get the best education that you can, and who knows what the future will hold. I never thought I was going to be an astronaut. There wasn't even an astronaut when I was 12 years old or even in college. I was out of college before astronaut space program even started. But I was sensitive to these thoughts I had. I call it, I kept my antennas up. So maybe that's what I ought to do. And so I started in those directions, and I was blessed. And so that's what I tell everybody. You never know what you're going to do, and when you start out at 12 years old or whatever, but you have feelings and desires, and I think you should chase after those desires and those feelings and those directions. Go in this direction. This is the way you should go.
Absolutely. If there was one more thing you could get to fly, anything at all, what would that last thing be, or that next thing? If you could have free reign, and I mean free reign, the very last thing. I mean, it's clear that you're extremely passionate about aviation. We share a lot of things alike. You had the opportunity, that wild card, the golden ticket to go into anything and go pull a load of G's or see something. What would you get yourself into?
Oh, that's at my age. I'm just thankful to be here. But I I don't pilot anymore. I've still got my license, but it's not used. I take me 2 years to get back current again. I'd still like to fly in the back seat of again, or fly an F-16 like you're doing. But and but I don't think at my age NASA or Air Force is going to give me another opportunity. But those dreams like that I still have, and I still love them. And my son is a Delta pilot. He was also F-16 pilot in the Air Guard for 23 years. He flew F-16. So I dreamed through him and others, but I know at my age, it's just sit back in the golden years and appreciate what I was able to do. And so that's where I sit now, thinking about, boy, that would be fun to do again.
Absolutely. Well, sir, those are my four main questions for today. We're going to go into a little section of the podcast now that I call the shameless plug. So, um, here we go. So, couple of minutes, promote anything that you want people to take a look at. So if people have got this far in the podcast, where should they go next? Whether that's a book or a bit of essential reading or a foundation or some of the work you're doing, just take a couple of minutes and let us know what you're up to, where we can find it, and we'll go from there.
Well, I tell everybody, everybody's different. And so that's why I keep saying, keep your antennas up and follow your heart and be willing to take a detour or whatever you want to call it into a new avenue. And so my sons and my grandchildren, none of them want to be astronauts, but they have a desire to do their best. So I encourage them just to follow your heart and follow the desires that you have that God's given you. And I think in that way, you're going to be blessed and you're going to be more satisfied than trying to do something that, well, I want to go make a lot of money, but if you're not, if money's not bad, and I got a lot of friends that made a lot of money, but it's something that they had a desire to do and they were good at it, and they followed their desires, and so. I think each of us has a desires that are inside that it'd be great to do this, that, and the other. So pray about it and ask God to lead you and direct you into your life. And I think whatever choice you make, hopefully be the right one for you. If not, you can always reevaluate.
Absolutely. Charlie, I just got to say, thank you so much for joining me today for the Talk4 podcast. It has been honestly an incredible experience speaking to you. I'd like to thank you for gracing the new studio with the first episode as well. But beyond everything, I mean, what an impressive individual. I mean, it's been such an honor to speak to you today, and I'm incredibly grateful to you. And you certainly have a huge fan here in the UK. And one day, I truly hope I get to shake your hand. So thank you again.
Well, it's my pleasure, Louis, and all the best to you in your new studio. And look forward to maybe stopping by and meeting you when I'm in the UK next time.
You have to let me know. I'd love to show you a great time, and I'll let you know how that flight goes as well. If it's a golden hour flight in the Sidewinder, and we're going quite high, and I think if I if that's as high as to get to go and as close to space as I get, I'll be still pretty happy with that, and we can chat about all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, just got to say, thank you guys for listening as well. This was episode 171. If you'd like to listen to the past episode, go and have a look at the channel, and if you'd like to listen in for the future ones as well, make sure to hit that subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Signing off for now. See you in the next episode. Good night.